The Fringe Podcast, Summer Rewatch, Episode 9.
Hi, my name is Josh Jackson. You're listening to the Fringe Podcast.
Web hosting for the Fringe Podcast is provided by HostGator. Easy WordPress installation, unlimited domains, unlimited disk space, unlimited bandwidth, and a 99.9% uptime guarantee. On sale now for $6.36 a month. Visit thefringepodcast.com/hosting and start serving up your website from the best hosting company in any universe. Welcome back to the Fringe Podcast Summer Rewatch as we are wrapping up Season 2 of Fringe tonight with an awesome group of people. And so tonight we're talking about Northwest Passage, Over There Part 1 and Over There Part 2, and also the episode Unearthed. Now, Unearthed is the episode that was originally shot in Season 1, and then it was aired in the middle of Season 2, but on the DVDs and in iTunes, it comes at the very end of Season 2, and so we decided to stick it at the end of Season 2 as well. So those are the 4 episodes that we are talking about tonight. And I am joined by John and Heather and Lou. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good. Doing great. Thank you.
Now, let's see. John, I believe this is the first time you have joined us for a podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I live in Salisbury, North Carolina, and have been watching Fringe since the very first, and found the podcast right after right before the last sort of eight episodes of Season 2, and just have been an avid listener to the podcast. Love it. It is just as much the great experience that Fringe is. So I've never been in the chat. I have 4 children, so I don't watch anything in its regularly scheduled time. That's just not part of my world.
Yep.
But I have been catching up along the way with you guys. Thanks so much.
Well, cool. It's good to have you with us tonight. And we also have another first-timer tonight, and that is Lou. How are you doing, Lou? Are you there? Let me see. Did we lose Lou?
Hi, sorry.
All right, there you go.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
Great. It's good to talk to you again, Daryl. We did I'm from the a much more modest Fringe podcast, the FBI podcast.
Right.
We had that post-season podcast with a bunch of other Fringe podcasts, which was a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to talking about some.
Yeah, should be a whole lot of fun, and that was a whole lot of fun as well, and we might be doing another one of those. I'm not sure. I know that there's been talk of maybe trying to do another roundtable type of podcast, so that would be cool if we did do that. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us tonight. And we also have Heather, and she's been. Is this your 3rd rewatch you've done with us, Heather, or your 4th?
I don't remember.
I don't either.
You could check the list and see, like the calendar list.
Yeah. By the way, Heather, we have received some feedback along the way as we've been doing these rewatch podcasts, and you're starting to develop a little fandom out there. We're receiving some good feedback about your insight that you are bringing to the podcast.
Oh, well, thanks. That's nice to hear.
Yeah, so we certainly appreciate having all 3 of you on the podcast tonight. Before we get into the episode recaps and all that stuff, I do have a little bit of a Fringe binge, so I'm going to play that music and talk about some stuff.
It's time to get the scoop on Fringe. It's the Fringe binge. The Fringe binge.
All right, we have just a few things to talk about in the Fringe binge tonight, and this one is hot off the press. I think it came out yesterday. Today is July the 21st, and this I think everyone pretty much found it out yesterday, and that is that Fringe is now available exclusively through Amazon Prime. You know, Amazon has their streaming service to kind of compete with Netflix, and if you're an Amazon Prime member, not only do you get the free shipping and some of the Kindle perks, but you also get some streaming perks as well. And some of the content is you get streamed for free. And so as of yesterday, Fringe seasons 1, 2, and 3 are available for free streaming if you are an Amazon Prime member. Now, you can still rent them by the episode and all of that stuff. None of that has changed. But if you're a Prime member, you're going to be able to get seasons 1, 2, and 3 for free. So this is exclusive to Amazon. What they're saying is through the summer. And by my clock or calendar, the summer is about half over. So I'm not sure what that means. If it's through the end of August or the end of September or longer, I don't know. I haven't seen an actual date. But I'm hearing it or seeing it advertised in a couple of places where they have exclusivity through the summer. So we'll keep you posted on when Netflix or other streaming services might get their hands on Fringe episodes. They're still available in iTunes for download by the episode as well. And this does not include Fringe Season 4. And my hunch on that is because those are not even out on DVD yet. So it would not make sense to give those available for free through Amazon Prime. Again, you can get those by the episode in Amazon if you purchase them, or purchase them by the episode in iTunes as well. So that's a really cool thing. So if you're a Prime member, you're definitely going to want to take advantage of that. You're going to be able to get all of the first 3 seasons of Fringe available to you for free. A couple of other things here for our Fringe binge. I hope that all of you were able to listen to the Comic-Con stuff that we brought you. I suspect if you're listening to this podcast, and you have, because we put all of those into the feed for our Golden Spiral Media All-Inclusive feed, and also into our Fringe Podcast feed. So we were able to do some really cool things with John Noble and the Science Channel. We went to the Dark Matters panel. We got to speak with John, and actually got to meet him. That was pretty awesome. And we did some other cool things with Science Channel as well, with their new show they have coming out in January with Josh Clark and Chuck Bryant, who do the Stuff You Should Know podcast. It's a great podcast. I love this podcast, and if you're not listening to that podcast, I highly recommend it. But we got to interview them and talk with them a little bit, and so we had that podcast. And then, of course, we had the Fringe panel. We got to go into the Fringe press room after the panel and interview, Joel Wyman, John Noble, Jessica Nicole, Josh Jackson, Lance Reddick, and Anna Torv. And we have all of those audio interviews available in our podcast feed, and we have them over on our YouTube channel as videos, and our YouTube channel is youtube.com/The Fringe Podcast. We don't really talk about that a whole lot because we've really just started adding content to that in the last couple of months. But all of our podcasts, including this one that we're doing right now, are being video recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. We also recorded all of those interviews that we did in the Fringe press room at Comic-Con. So if you want to see those interviews instead of just hearing them only, you can go over to our YouTube channel and check all of those out as well. So we had a lot of really exciting things happen at Comic-Con. The hat I'm wearing right here, and if you want to see the hat, go over to the YouTube channel and you can see it in the video. They handed these fedoras out to everyone that went to the Fringe panel, which I think that room holds about 6,500 people. So a lot of people were getting fedoras. They were also handing them out in the Fringe press room as people came in. They wanted to make sure everybody had a Fringe fedora. And then I left San Diego on Monday, the day after the panel, and I saw a lot of people on the plane and in the airport wearing these fedoras. So they certainly got some marketing opportunities or whatever out of these fedoras. A lot of people liked them. I like it. I'll be wearing this during the podcast for a while instead of my regular fedora. So it was a whole lot of fun. It was a great time, and we're certainly glad to have been able to do that. And speaking of Fringe, Season 5 started filming this week on Wednesday. So they started filming 3 days ago, and they'll be wrapping that up, I think, at the end of November. Right before Thanksgiving is when Season 5 will wrap. But it has officially started, so that's really awesome, and cannot wait for Season 5. Now, I want to bring the panel in here, John, Heather, and Lou, and ask you guys, when we were at Comic-Con, they showed us a trailer for Season 5, and we talked about it on our podcast for the panel. This was actually footage that there appeared to be some new footage in the trailer, but it turned out that was footage that they filmed back in Season 4, specifically for this purpose. It's not new footage that they have filmed for Season 5, although, I don't know, they might go ahead and use it for Season 5, I'm not sure. But this trailer is now available, has been available, I think since the day of the panel or the day after the panel, on YouTube or various places. Have you all seen it? And if so, what are your thoughts on the trailer?
I've seen it, and I thought it was good and motivating us to be looking forward to the season to come. I enjoyed it that way too, and I was already looking forward to what was coming, but it got some more excitement going. I thought it was interesting how lots of the clips are from the seasons we've already seen.
Uh-huh.
There's only very few stuff that's new, so that wasn't as exciting for me, but it was still interesting.
Yeah. I think there were 2 or 3 sections that I noticed that were new footage. John, were you going to say something?
Yes, thanks. It was great to see Olivia in that footage so much. She was not in 419 Letters of Transit at all,
right?
Which was an interesting choice. So it was good to see her interacting in that, and them talking about how Etta is just like her mom and those things. I just found it amazing that the cast and crew, as much as they already put into the show, did this just as Wyman was saying, did this just to be the publicity piece, to take to Fox to say, this is what we can do with season 5, and that they did that totally on their own, I think was just a testament to how much they believe in what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree, and it's really exciting. And even with just a couple of shots that are new, I don't want to technically call them season 5 shots at this point, unless they choose to use them. But man, it was really exciting, and kind of showed you a little bit. I mean, we already kind of knew that they were going into the future for season 5. That got confirmed at Comic-Con, and really, for me, really makes me even more excited about how this season is going to go. And one of the things that was really awesome in the Fringe press room, and if you guys in the audience listening to this haven't listened to those podcasts, I really do encourage you to go and listen to those. Everyone was very, very grateful that they're going to get the opportunity to tell this story and finish it up and resolve it the way that they want to, and not just have these unanswered questions. There might still be some unanswered questions. Joel didn't make any promises to answer everything, and in fact he made it really seem like he doesn't have a desire to answer everything, because for a couple reasons that leaves it open for other projects in the future, but it also leaves it up to the imagination to think about how those questions might be resolved, and instead of just answering everything for you. But I got the impression that they are going to answer a whole lot of things, and a lot of the things that what he said was a lot of the things that seemed to be kind of left hanging out there after season 1 or season 2 were not just left hanging out there for no reason, and we're going to see what that means as season 5 progresses. And for me, that's really, really exciting to think about all this stuff finally coming together. A lot of it came together through season 4, but there's still more out there. So I can't wait for season 5, of course.
Hey, Daryl, I had a question for you.
Okay.
At the beginning of the trailer, the executive producers are listed as J.J. Abrams, Joel Wyman, of course, and then Brian Burke. Have you seen anything that he's going to sort of not take the place of Pinkner, but sort of be in that showrunner role now?
No, I haven't. Now, back in season 1 they were, but I don't know if that's a carryover from that, or if there's something new that has developed there. I don't know. Joel, really took ownership of the show when we were at Comic-Con, and kind of put everything in the first person. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and my vision for this, and all that stuff, which I think is great. He didn't. I didn't get the impression that there was another showrunner besides him. All right, well, let's move on with the outline here, and make sure I've got one other thing to talk about here. Actually, 2. We took a lot of pictures while we were at Comic-Con, and we've uploaded those over to our Facebook page. So if you want to see a lot of the pictures we took, and we haven't uploaded them all yet, Clint still has a lot of those on his camera that I haven't had a chance to get from him. But there's a photo album over on our Facebook page. So go over to facebook.com/goldenspiralmedia and look through our photo albums there. You'll see the Comic-Con 2012 photo album. So you can see a lot of the awesome things that we were able to get photos of there. And then the last thing I'll mention is that Science Channel, I talked about them earlier and I skipped this part, they have also acquired the syndication rights to broadcast Fringe, which we talked about a couple months ago. That is going to start November 21st, so look for that on Science Channel. And I think it's going to be a great place for Fringe. They've done a great job with Firefly, and they will also do a great job with Fringe, I'm sure. All right. Well, I guess with that, let's get into our food for thought and talk about these episodes.
Root beer float. Butterscotch pudding. Mr. Papaya. Fruit cocktail. Coffee yogurt.
All right. We're going to start things off here. The first episode we're going to talk about tonight is Northwest Passage. The synopsis for this one is Peter teams up with Sheriff Mathis in Noyo County, Washington, after being implicated in a bizarre murder. Still intent on hiding his location from the science team, he provides her accurate insight into the alternate universe perpetrators. Walter flounders at home, concerned he may be recommitted. This was written by Zach Stintz and Ashley Miller and Nora Zuckerman and Lilla Zuckerman and directed by Joe Chappelle. All right, let me check Skype to make sure we have everybody with us still. And Heather, why don't you take it away?
Okay. I have several quotes I thought were interesting. Peter says that if you can imagine it, it's possible, which of course is kind of like the Fringe motto in a way. And we also get Walter's wonderful breakdown with the in the grocery store.
Yes, we
which
do.
Was fun to see, but also, sad for him.
Right.
And then later Walter is talking to Olivia and Astra, and he says, if Peter doesn't come back, we'll send me back to the hospital, won't they? And Olivia says, I won't let that happen.
Yeah.
And it made me remember how in our new timeline, she had gotten him from the hospital without Peter, and the FBI was able to just tap him around without having to have the weird guardianship thing. So... It makes us wonder how much in the first place Peter was needed because they couldn't get him out, or that was just the quickest way, and otherwise they would have just sent him away anyway. But because they're used to using his talents now.
Yeah, and am I remembering wrong, or wasn't there also something in season 4 when she had the paperwork to check on whether or not he was still sane or not, and send him back? And she checked it that he was okay to remain outside of the hospital.
Yeah, like Olivia was the one in charge of something.
Yes.
So, yeah. So we have Peter and Mathis have their conversation where she says, near the end, she says, you're looking for meaning in things that have no meaning.
Right.
And some of it, I'm like, was that a message to us to not dig too deep because just because they look cool, that's why they're there.
Wall there.
Yeah, but then some of it, the whole episode, Peter was questioning what he was doing and if he was remembering things correctly. So some of it, pulling from that, and then Mathis reassures him and says, I was alone for a long time, but I found my place and you will too. And so then, at the end of the season, we see him go to the other side and then come back. And so that's our kind of him having his chance to find out where he belongs, which continues on in season 4 that we're just thinking about him there.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah. And, okay. My other big note here, in this episode, I was noticing, near the end, of all their, sleeping references. So they show Peter falling asleep at the first episode of the episode. And the waitress Krista's killed while he's asleep, it was his nightmare, and it happened while he was sleeping. But then they don't show him sleeping any other time, And then Mathis asks him, "Oh, have you slept lately?" And so we don't see him go to sleep again till the very end of the episode, and then he's interrupted. It made me think of Alice in Wonderland in a way, because she falls asleep and then she has this adventure and wakes up at the end.
Okay.
And so if we were really wanting to stretch things, we could say, oh, the whole episode was in his mind and didn't really happen, which we know isn't true, but it was a little interesting thought experiment to think of. And there was another reference at the end that made me think of Alice in Wonderland, was when Walternate walks in, we see his reflection in the mirror behind him. Like, we're seeing Walternate through the looking glass, which is a Wonderland reference in that as well.
Okay.
And then they end up going through the looking glass to other worlds. So, yeah. And the references continue, because in the end, when he decides to, go back to sleep, there's the song plays, and it says, "I could sleep when I was alone. Is there a ghost in my house?"
Yes.
And we know Peter has a ghost of his forgotten childhood and his other father in the alternate universe. And he's mentioned in previous episodes how he hasn't had any dreams or nightmares since he was a kid. And so now his hidden dreams are coming into reality, like he's waking up and the dreams are coming back, and then Walternate comes back. And so if this whole episode was him being asleep and having all these things happen that he wasn't quite sure is real, he wakes up at the end and sees, oh, it is real. I do have a father in another universe, and I do have this other history I didn't know about because I made it into a dream or a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else?
That basically was it.
Okay. John, what about you?
Okay. I know folks have been trying to keep up with the food references, and Walter needed his pudding pops. So
Yes, he did.
he did. It's great to see Martha Plimpton. I'm a child of the Goonies
Yes.
era, and it was great to see her take a big role in this episode.
Yeah, she did a good job.
She did a great job. She
Yeah.
did. Found it interesting that Peter was ready to jump on board in any way, shape, or fashion with Krista, the waitress. Knowing what we know now, he was angry with Olivia for her knowing, and he didn't know what that looked like, and so it was that was played out well, I thought, even though we didn't know at the time when we were watching the episode.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me that Newton was taking these parts of their brains out, but that led Peter to the situation, but it really wasn't about him in the end, especially the second victim that really didn't have anything to do with him. So I just found it interesting that they used that as the backstory, but it drew him out, but it didn't really have anything to do with him. So.
Right.
So I thought that was an interesting point. He said to Mathis, "I'm going to find my answers," and that reminded me of the same way that he starts taking out the shapeshifters in season 3 on his own. He's got his own mission, his own purpose, and he's going to take care of it his way.
Okay.
So interesting character continuity there.
I like that. Yeah.
Love the Wild West music as he gets his guns and arms up since he's out in Washington State. The guy who's with Newton in the forest, like when they're shooting the dart and all that, I don't know that we ever saw him before or after. I don't know who that was, if it was just a random shapeshifter or who that was, and
yeah, I don't know.
may not have any meaning, but
yeah, it could have been just a shapeshifter that's local to that area, was brought in for assignment. I don't know.
Yeah. Peter said that the shapeshifters take on positions of authority, and I know that's true for the most part. But also, the three of them that came over at the same time, I think Newton had them in strategic positions to make sure things would happen. But I'm not sure that they always take on those positions of authority. I just thought that was an interesting statement.
Yeah, I think that's true, but at the same time, those specific people were like the bank guy, you know, those were taken over. Not necessarily. I mean, not authority in the sense of they were a police official or a congressman, but he was the authority at the bank to give them the access that they needed. You know, they take over strategic positions, I guess would be the way I would put it.
And finally, there's a deleted scene on the DVD, and basically it talks about how Peter's faith has been totally shaken in the FBI, and what he said was, I thought I was connected to a family, and it was all a lie.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot of deep-seated issues there. So.
Yeah, definitely. And it was such an interesting episode, too, with... you know, we got Brown Betty right before this. You know, this was really a better continuation from the previous episode before Brown Betty. But just so many different things. You know, we finally got the Walternate, or the Mr. Secretary character revealed. We found out that it was Walternate, and that was a really big reveal right there at the end of the episode. Heather, you took a couple of my notes, which is completely okay. A couple of things that I just noticed or that I liked about this episode. You know, again, I think because of it was very clearly in the Pacific Northwest. You know, they identified it as being in the Pacific Northwest, and so they brought in a lot more of that scenery to give it that feel, which it's in Vancouver. Obviously, that's easy for them to do. But because of that, it had a very X-Files feel to me, or specifically, even more specific, I should say, a Twin Peaks feel, which I love Twin Peaks, and if you guys haven't seen that, I recommend going and checking that out. It's online. So two of my favorite shows of all time, Twin Peaks and X-Files, you know, kind of had that feel. We also saw Violet's sedan chair. We saw the record again in this episode. We again saw the double-decker car, which obviously, when Astrid was cleaning it, it helped Walter come up with an idea on how they could track Peter down. So that was another occurrence of the double-decker car. And I think we mentioned this the first time we did the podcast on this episode, but behind Peter on the wall in his hotel room there was a painting of a frozen lake, and I think that's not coincidental. The only other thing I'll mention about this one was I really kind of liked how, you know, here's Peter away from Walter, and we all know that Peter is brilliant, and we've seen Peter do some really awesome things, but here he is away from Walter, where it's really him driving this investigation, and he came up with some really brilliant ideas on how to track down this killer, and it just kind of reinforced that Peter, in his own right, is a genius and is a brilliant man and has a lot of experience to draw from, and is a creative thinker. Maybe not to the same way that Walter is, but he is very much a bishop in and of himself, and that was definitely showcased in this episode.
It also showed, because he took the initiative, like he didn't just drive past the restaurant, he stopped. It shows him, I guess, changing from before he joined the Fringe team when he was just caring about himself. Now he's had a chance to be used to being the hero and being used to the one that finds the bad guy and figures out the mystery. And so we get to see him in that role he's made for himself, saying, oh, I want to figure this out. I want to prevent people from dying. And his new, I guess, interest there versus him some years ago.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I love how he explained his civilian consulting role, and different roles have for different expertise, and his is weird.
That was good. All right, I think Lou is ready to come back in here. We're going to try to bring him back in and see if this works. Hello, are you there? Are you there?
Hello?
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 All right, I think we've got you connected back here. Do you have any...
I apologize.
Oh, that's all right. Technology is wonderful, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Do you have any thoughts you want to share on the Northwest Passage?
Sure. And hopefully, I'm sorry if I'm repeating points because I didn't hear everything everybody else said. But okay. For me, I really like this episode because one of the problems Fringe, or one of the things that Fringe hadn't really addressed too much is Peter, because of Olivia's story and how powerful Walter Bishop as a character. Peter had always kind of been like third light out of those three. So, and because so much of the series revolves around his character, I just love an episode where he was front and center, especially at this point in the series. We hadn't really seen that yet until this point, so it was really nice to see an episode where Peter was, sort of being proactive and taking command of his own destiny in that, and the themes of being, as part of a family and having, or feeling that he was part of a family, as I believed John mentioned, and then having that trust broken. I thought that was a very strong dynamic, and this episode comes in a part of this series arc where arguably the show was at its creative high, where pretty well every episode from Jacksonville till way into the third season, the show's just hitting it out of the park almost with every episode. So yeah. I really enjoy this episode. And, Walter's breakdown in the supermarket, the strawberry flavored death soliloquy, Astrid and Olivia seeing exactly how dependent Walter is in Peter when they come back to the house and just find it a mess. Yeah. Another really strong moment. And Martha Plimpton was just fantastic in this episode. So, there's just a lot of great things going on in this episode.
Yeah, I agree. Very good. Well, the glyphs in this episode spelled return, which I think points to Peter's return to the Redverse at the end of the episode. The clue for the next episode, which is over there, part 1, when Peter and Mathis return to the bridge, he finds the Bazooka Joe gum wrapper, and it says, "You can't get there from here," which is the punchline panel. It's a 2-panel comic, and it doesn't make sense. They don't go together, but that's not important. It said, "You can't get there from here," on the gum wrapper, which is an interesting, the clue for the next episode where they're trying to get there from here to the other side. So that is, as I mentioned, over there, part 1. The synopsis is: Peter decides to return to his origins. Walter and Olivia follow him to the other side with the help of known Cortexiphan victims. Peter connects with his birth mother, while the alternate Fringe division mobilizes to counteract what seems like an attack on their universe. This was written by J.H. Wyman and Jeff Pinkner and Akiva Goldsman, and directed by Akiva Goldsman. And John, I'm going to let you go first this time.
Okay. Sticking with the food references, the I love bacon.
It's still one of my favorite scenes, just because it's so cheesy. She's like, "Oh, Peter," like, he loves the bacon. Their son has returned.
I love bacon. I thought this was the coolest opening that the series had, showing everything from what had happened already in the Redverse, and then showing the perspective of Olivia and Peter and the Cortexiphan gang. Olivia and Walter and the Cortexiphan gang watching, and just with the red title intro and everything. It was just probably the coolest opening that the series had yet. Might have even trumped the 1985 opening. So
okay.
When they went to Nina's office, she looked at the drawing, and her question was, "What side is this?" And found that very interesting. She has known about this for some time, and obviously has a whole lot more knowledge, and just like we've always known with Nina, has a whole lot more knowledge than she's letting on. Walter says to the Cortexiphan gang, "What I did was unexcusable, but what we believed we needed guardians." And I found that scene to be extremely moving. He said, if no one needs me, I'll go have a good cry.
Right.
So, and interesting, after he leaves, Mathis, James Heath, the one who can heal folks, Nick says to him, he's not the same guy that I remember, and James says he's exactly the same guy. So, found that interesting.
Yeah.
Walternate's briefing with the Redverse team, and Olivia saying, "Okay, I'll play." Just found it very interesting. Her candor in front of the Secretary of Defense was almost insubordinate. So interesting. and Walternate revealing that ZFT is a lie, even though he wrote it. Thought that was a great tie back to season 1. Elizabeth looks ancient compared to what to how we see her in season 4, and I know I know the discussion was about that, about how she had aged or not aged, and looking back at this after seeing her in season 4, she looks very, very, very old compared to that, and that makes sense. That she has gone this entire time without seeing Peter, and whatever reset happened with the machine and all that. That makes sense to me now. So. This was one of those, I know for copyright reasons we can't turn on the episode and all watch it together, but this would be just a great party game for all of us to shout out the differences that we see in the red and blue verse. I remember at the time listening to the podcast and us and everybody just having a great time talking about, I saw this and I saw that and I saw the comics and I saw the everything that was different in that. So very cool.
Yeah.
Crispy Lincoln, that was just of all the gross out moments in this series, that was definitely one of the highlights. that was something. And Olivia watching Olivia and Frank just tore my heart out because there's so much in the look that she had, even watching them in shadow. It just really, really spoke to me, and just broke my heart for where she was even at that time. So that's what I have.
All right, good stuff. And I'm with you. This intro for me, I had forgotten how good this was, and I tried. Hey, if I hit myself in the face there, I tried to put myself back in that position I was in, experiencing this for the first time, where I didn't know all this stuff, and I think we figured out before they showed the red credits that this was the alternate universe this was happening in. But still, it was so good the way that they did that first opening segment and then went into the red title sequence. I'm with you, John. I thought it was maybe the best one of them all. All right, Lou, why don't you share with us your thoughts on Over There Part 1?
Okay, I just like to echo. I agree. The opening credits were just fantastic. I really liked the scene with Olivia by herself in the bar drinking, worried about Peter, obviously, and this is where we kind of see that whole relationship starting to build up, which has been played pretty low key throughout the series, which is something I actually like, that they don't overplay those moments. So I really enjoyed that scene, and it was interesting that the Observer gave her that note, which or the picture, so that kicked off what will eventually to kick off the whole arc for season 3, and there was a spider reference for I'm blanking on his name. That's terrible. Charlie, thank you. Jeez, Charlie. So, which again will come back next season as well, which I really enjoyed. I liked the scene with Brandon, and Fringe does this really well. Is explaining exactly the science of crossing back and forth with the coffee mug. Hitting that and making it disappear, where they believe the Bell, what state Bell is in as well. There was a moment with Olivia and Ella giving Ella the necklace, which I don't believe has ever played out, or I don't remember anyhow, that Olivia getting the necklace back from Ella. So that's one of those missed or unfulfilled story points to this date. And of course, Peter reuniting with his mother. It's just especially after the Peter episode, it's just really an emotional moment to see that play out for the mother on the other side. And Orla Brady is anytime she's on the show, I think it raises the level of the show as well. She's just a fantastic actress. I really enjoy her portrayal. And like you said, Daryl, that we finally gotten to the other side, and it's hard to remember, or you really have to make a big mental adjustment that we don't really know these characters at all, and they're very much still the enemy for us. And it's a big mental leap now in a ways to go back to these earlier episodes and let's see these characters in this light, and then think about where they end up when we finally say goodbye to them in season 4.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I was thinking too. I mean, as I'm watching this now, the cool thing I can do now is as I'm rewatching it, I have a totally different feeling about these characters than I did when we first met them. You know, they were the enemy to us when we first started watching, and now we have a genuine affection for these characters. This was the first time we ever met Lincoln Lee, and all of us love Lincoln Lee, and we're sad to see him go away. Spoiler alert! At the end of season 4, and but kind of watching it through that mentality, I was really able to put myself more in a position of understanding their point of view as I was watching through it this time, specifically as I'm thinking about what Walternate told Lincoln and Olivia and Charlie, and he's like, you know, they're deceitful and they will look just like us and act just like us and make you think they're friendly. I'm paraphrasing here, but they're lying. And I know that Walternate obviously had his agenda, but putting myself in their position, you know, they were being attacked at that moment. And, you know, probably definitely a lot of the ill feelings I had towards the Redverse at this point were definitely misdirected. And I think that that's really what the writers wanted us to have, was misdirected ill feelings towards the Redverse. But, you know, I was able to kind of help. I was kind of able to put myself back in their point of view much better this time than I was the first time watching it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Heather, what are your thoughts on this episode?
Okay. I too was struck by how good the first part was. I loved the music, and then it went up to show the Zeppelin in the sky. And anyway, so we all have our chance to rave about their good job doing this episode. I was noticing how this end of season episodes gave their hint of what the whole next season was going to be. The whole next season is in Alternate Universe. Just like this season, they showed letters of transit, and that was our hint of what this next season's going to have in store. So, and it seems, well, that's what they like to do. Get you all psyched up and then make you wait 3 months for summer.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I when Olivia was taken to meet the other Cortex Fan kids, Royal said how they tracked down 5 other Cortex Fan kids, but only 3 of them were successful and got to go on the mission. So I'm wondering, who are these other Cortex Fan kids that they found? Or, like, in season 4, when they were doing that, where the Cortex Fan kids were trying to, like, pull the worlds together, we saw people that we hadn't seen before. So we can just assume maybe it was some of them, or we could assume it was, I don't know if we'll ever see who these other people are. But that was interesting. Another thing, they showed the federal building in Boston, and it was, they walk in when they're still, like, it's not all the way finished. And they said it's the new headquarters that Peter demanded from the whatever Senate committee.
Right.
And it's the same layout as the Red Fringe headquarters. So the Red side got their updated office first, and the Fringe finance department got to build the set and keep it for a whole year, you know, that way, and use it for 2 different things. So, yeah. But in the alternate universe, it's just in New York instead of Boston.
Right.
So, yeah. Walter, when they're in the circle on the stage and it was helping them to cross over, he says, allow your imagination to take you to the other side. And it reminded me of when Elizabeth Bishop says in Subject 13, if you can imagine a better world, you can make a better world.
Oh, yeah.
So they're both in that wavelength of powers of the mind affecting your actual life. Nick says how after they were introduced in the new headquarters building, which, by the way, I don't know if the blue side ever ends up using, and so we just, or I don't remember seeing them there. Anyway, we'll have to watch that. But Nick says how Walter may have damaged them, but he also made them special.
Right.
And then he says, fate's a tricky thing. But the idea of the cortex band kids being damaged but special comes up a lot, like in season 1, where everyone was, when they're trying to do experiments on humans lots of different times, they're like, oh, this will make you special, even though at the time they're like, it's horrible, you're in, you know. So we get more of that theme in there. Okay. So September gives the warning to Olivia, and I was trying to think this through. So September was giving the warning, so Peter would not go to the red side, so
right.
He would not get in the machine, so he would not combine the worlds. And then what does that lead to? Because I was trying to think it through, because if September's not with the other observers, does he mean... But then later, when he disappears, they say, oh, that's good. And so I was kind of trying to figure out where that would fit with all their plans and what happens next, or what. But I didn't quite come to a conclusion.
Well, I mean, we saw at the end of Season 3 that getting into the machine ultimately caused the destruction of both universes. And the observers do need at least one universe to remain in order to take it over. But even then, I think, aside from that, September and his group that may not necessarily want the destruction or to take over the universe, they still don't, I don't think they wish for its destruction, because their future lies also in its remaining together, right? I mean, that is the future that they come from. So it could just be that he's wanting, even though he doesn't necessarily want to take over the blue universe, he doesn't wish for its destruction either. And by getting into the machine, Peter's going to ultimately destroy both universes.
Maybe from his point of view, the universes fighting against each other and having like the soft spots and fringe events are not as bad as the other option.
Yeah, maybe so. Okay, anything else?
That's it. I didn't have as much notes as I thought I would on this episode.
Yeah, I didn't have as many as I thought I would either, but I've got a couple here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you guys didn't cover already. We saw that Bell made the machine, and I think John hit on that earlier, which I'm still kind of confused on. Maybe you guys can help me out with this, because we saw that Walter and Peter made the machine and took it back through the wormhole to get it back in time. But, this is William Bell's tech that we see. Nina and Walter agree that this is William Bell's design. So how does that fit in? Were they mistaken, or was there something else that I'm not remembering?
Maybe when Walter, had his whole intact brain, as we'll talk about here in the next episode, but while he was still fully intact, maybe he and William came up with the design for this machine, because they thought, again, they were doing this whole Guardian doo-dah for the war coming, and so maybe it is William's technology, but it's still Walter's idea to begin with.
I have some idea on the machine. I put it in my notes for the other episode, but because that talks more about the machine.
Right.
But we end up finding out that the machine's made by future Walter, and current Walter finds it, or current Walternate finds it, because he sees the clues that were left, and that the machine should be used by Peter, and we think it's a weapon and not safe for a Fringe to use, but then it stops the Fringe events from happening. And so at this point, we're in the middle of the time loop with them, that being in the future and then going back, and then finding it in the present, and then in the future, that future being erased and somehow. So it's kind of, and it looks like it looks like Bell's design, because Walter and Bell, I think we can say they worked together so long that they might have adopted each other's styles without quite realizing it all the time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I didn't think about them, iterating through this any number of times until they finally came up with a different path. Peter took a different path. Yeah, I guess it could be that. I don't know. Any other thoughts out there? Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on Over There Part 1? Okay. Well, I did have one more here. Nick was recognized by Lincoln on the bridge there in Central Park, and we get their answer to that later on in Season 4. We find out that they, Lincoln dated Nick's sister or something like that, or Nick dated Lincoln's sister. Wasn't that something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they knew each other from childhood.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. The glyphs in this episode spelled weapon, and the clue, I couldn't find. I've got this in here, but this is from White Tulip that was in this same slot last week. So I could not find a clue, which these were one episode combined or shot together. We're going to see here in just a second as I rattle off the writers and directors. It's the same crew, so there may not have been one because these were really one big episode. So Over There Part 2, the synopsis is Walter and Olivia continue their quest to retrieve Peter. Belle intercedes and helps them with their mission. Alternate universe counterparts use a covert tactic when Peter slips away from them. William Bell may have made the ultimate sacrifice to help the mission. And again, this was written by Jeff Pinkner, Joel Wyman, Akiva Goldsman, and directed by Akiva Goldsman. All right, Lou, why don't you take us off on Over There Part 2?
Okay, wow. There's so much in this episode. This is probably, I think, the cornerstone episode for much of what happens in Season 3 and even into Season 4. But one of the things that I think we've all talked about over time and time again is how we love that Fringe does things and is very good with continuity, or is very good at leveraging off of things they've done in previous episodes. So to find out in this episode that the amber is used to close up these breakdowns in the universe, in the alternate universe, was just kind of mind-blowing. And even more that these people, just how widespread the damage is on the other side. We've seen on our side that there's been very localized and very rare occurrences, but Walter opening the door on the other side has caused widespread damage. They have their own Long Island triangle, and the damage is quite extensive there, as we see later on when Walter and Belle are driving to the lab. And it's just a very, up until this point we've heard of what we realize that Walter has caused some damage on their sides, but until this episode we don't realize just how great that damage has been. So this is a real eye-opening episode in that perspective. And any episode that Leonard Nimoy, what can I say? I grew up with the guy. He's one of my childhood heroes, and he was just fantastic in this episode. Him and Belle together, something that we waited for a long time. It was just fantastic to see. They really had that kind of like a arguing married couple kind of mantra going through the episode. So they're and the way they riffed off of each other, I loved it too. There was like McCartney and Lennon of the scientists, you could say. Peter meeting Olivia, which of course now means so much more in reruns than when we first saw it. But it was that was quite the moment as well. We had our first double fight with Olivia and Olivia as well, which was great.
Yeah, it was good.
And Anna Torv just really knocks it out of the park in this episode. So I really can't say enough of how great she was here, playing two different characters like this. And because it was for the first time, it was so new for us. It was just fantastic to see. And Peter with the device. I mean, wow, that when that piece of the machinery snaps around his wrist, it's like, whoa. That diagram is really taking on ominous portents at this point. And I loved the bit at the end with Leonard Nimoy with talking about the Model 77 and then shooting it off. That was pretty cool. And in a way, his last scene in this episode was very reminiscent of what he did in the Wrath of Khan when he sacrificed himself, or so we think, to allow everybody else to get back to their own universe. So, yeah, just a lot of stuff in this episode, and those are the high points for me. And hopefully, I've left something for the rest of you to talk about.
All right, Heather. What about you?
I have one quote I noticed, which, well, when Walter Olivia asked Peter what her other self is like, and he gives this great description saying, Olivia is trying to make up for something, right some imaginary wrong. She's haunted, and it shows how Peter knows her very well. Like, that's spot on. So we learned about Olivia, who wants to, defend those who can't defend themselves,
right,
and get the bad guys. And so, yeah, I was struck again by that beautiful description. And then we learn in this episode the problem with the machine, why it won't work, is the power source, as Walternate says. And we find out that Peter is the power source. So we get this idea of people as energy, which we also have in the Cortexiphan kids, because they're their own power source to travel between the worlds. And so that's mentioned. And then in season 3 it continues on with this, how Olivia has this power to somehow in there. And it's also mentioned later in the episode when they're talking about how to get back home, how Olivia has the talent, but they say, does she have enough power to do that again? And then, of course, we have Bell using his body as a power source to help them cross, which, from what we learn about Bell in the later seasons, makes me wonder. So he uses his body to help them cross when Olivia's not there, because it's the other Olivia. So it makes me think, did he want the switch to happen? Did he know about this? Did he want the machine to be built, and so he was all in on her going over to find the other parts and then making the switch? And did he know he eventually would be back, because if the machine got turned on, then the universe would be reset? And I'm like, how much is he manipulating everyone at this point, or not? So, yeah, even though, he was great in this episode, like we mentioned him with Walter, I was not trusting him at all.
So you think he was manipulating everything?
I don't know. I was trying to fit that in and see, well, if he is at this point, that's a lot of things to have planned, because he would plan to die and then come back and hope, and so he's trusting all his dominoes to fall and them to finish making the machine, and then the universe to get reset, which means he's alive again. And I don't know how much, when the universe was reset, it wasn't him like, oh, now I'm alive again. It was just him, he didn't know anything happened, so he just continued with, what he'd already started. And in this universe, if he hadn't been killed, then he would have just gone on to his next thing, which we find out later what it would have been. Just like before, we found if Jones hadn't died, what more he would do. And so I guess this is the same kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think too. When it got reset, I think we got a slightly different version of Bell, one that he was fully capable of being in the other before the reset, but different circumstances produced a different outcome. And so I'm going to stick with this. Bell was pretty genuine in what he was doing with helping them get back over to the other side, and was not trying to help faux Olivia. Probably didn't realize it was faux Olivia. But I'm not convinced he was killed by the transfer. We never saw. We were led to believe he died. He sacrificed himself, but I was never really sure that he actually died. But I don't think that's important.
Well, we do have find out he did have some kind of backup plan with his soul magnet and OCST.
Right.
So even if he didn't know it, he would die at that time. He was the schemer and planner, so he had his backup plan ready. So, yeah. And we do get references, well, when him and Walter are arguing, Walter's saying, you're only interested in making money and having glory and stuff. So, like you said, hints of what he would have become, which we see later.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts?
That's it.
All right, John?
Yeah, I was saying there's a commentary on the episode from Pinkner, Wyman, and Goldsman, and they come out and say at this point that they felt like they were treating Belle like a guardian angel. So I wonder somewhere along the way if somebody changed their mind in terms of where Belle got to at the end of season 4. Looking at again, keeping with the food references, we had the KFC fried chicken and Walter figuring out the 11th special herb and spice that made the Colonel's recipe. And interesting. Lincoln
got crispy fries later.
Right.
That's terrible.
Also, it's a great shot with William Bell eating licorice or red vines as they're driving into the city, and you see the blight. But I just thought that was a very, very cool shout out with William Bell eating those. I thought the flyover at the beginning of the episode was such a cool way to expose us to the Amber Effect and what had happened, and the computer reading off these different events. I just thought that was a great way to give the exposition with that. In terms of the episode clue, if you go back to Northwest Passage, I sort of took this as a clue. The pen that she has that Mathis has from her partner says "Find the crack," and there's a reference to them getting back from the red verse back to the blue verse, and Walter says to Olivia, "You may be able to provide a crack back. What we need is a doorstop."
Doorstop,
and
right.
So I just thought that was a neat reference.
I like that. Yeah,
back to Northwest Passage. I just echo what Heather said. I had the exact same note. She's always trying to make up for something. She's haunted. We saw the Demon's Twist Rust in the lab that was closed down at Harvard. Interesting, Bell says, to keep tabs on Walternate, I had to stay close to him, and that's how he rationalizes or explains how he's been supplying Walternate and the Department of Defense with weaponry. Interesting choice of explanation there. I just can't say enough about Anna Torv and her taking on these two characters, the physicality, just the way she brought out both Olivia and Olivia was just outstanding, and this is weird to say, but only a small taste of what was to come and what she's been able to do with those two characters, and I just can't say enough about that. Her reaction to Olivia's reaction to seeing Scarley, I found that to be such an amazing moment when she looks at him and like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen him since I killed him when he was a shapeshifter. Just really, you could tell her mind was blown right there as she was trying to escape from taking out Olivia. Belle says to Peter, when they finally meet, "You're holding up better than I would have thought." And I don't know that we ever really got back to an explanation of what he meant there, but I thought that was a very interesting piece of dialogue. Once they got back, seeing Astrid in the lab, it was like, oh, we haven't seen her, basically this whole time, and it was just great to catch back up with her and her making pies, just like Walter would, while Peter and the team was away. Interestingly, the first time Peter smiles at all is when he's talking to Walter, and he says, "I'm trying to see this your way. I can't, but you did cross universes twice to save my life, so that's got to count for something." And he gives him just the slightest smile there. I thought that was nice. And two more things. The closing scene with Olivia in the cell is still one of the creepiest things that I've taken away from the series. The sheer terror that she showed there was just amazing.
Yeah.
And Walternate's complete control of the situation and him sort of feeding on that was just, Heather talked about, leaving us with those kind of images and then waiting 3 months, and that was something to chew on. So, interestingly, there's also a deleted scene to this episode, and it's Walternate and Peter in a car, in a Ford Taurus, which they clearly show, which I thought, okay, the Secretary of Defense drives a Ford Taurus, but while they're in there, he syncs up or gets his media going, and he pulls up Violet's sedan chair, and he talks about how the third album is their best, and Peter says, "Oh well, where I come from, they only did one," and so just an interesting give and take there. So that's what I have.
Cool. Yeah, I forgot about that scene. I've got a couple of extra things. Speaking of music, this one had a song by the B-52s, and I think Joel mentioned this in one of the conference calls that we did with him, where he was talking about some of the cool things that they've gotten to do with different creative people. And this episode gave us a couple of those. We had the B-52s song, which is called New Sensation, and it's playing, and I barely caught it. In fact, I had forgotten about it until I heard it. I'm like, that sounds like the B-52s. I wonder what song it is. And then in my research, I remembered, or I found out and then remembered that this was a song that they created exclusively for the show. I guess they were fans of the show. I don't remember the full story. It was on one of our Joel Wyman conference calls, and Pinkner. And one of them was talking about that, how they had made a song exclusively for this episode. And then, of course, the comic book covers that we saw were done exclusively for this episode as well. And those are some really cool things that Fringe has given us. At the end of the day, when Fringe is all said and done, those are a couple of things that will endure, that we were gifted through this series. Again, we saw when Charlie and Olivia, which would be Olivia, not faux Olivia, are driving together, he doesn't realize that it's the other Olivia for him. And he's talking about how this job isn't what it used to be, and how he doesn't know how they can protect it anymore, which is straight up out of the line that we got from Charlie back in the pilot. It was either the pilot or episode 2. And so that was really cool to see that dialogue brought back again. And then, the line that Olivia gave Peter, where she could think of 100 reasons why he should come back to the other universe, but in the end, it's because he belongs with her. And that's true. I mean, September taught us that, right? That Peter does belong with Olivia and not with faux Olivia. And, that was really cool to kind of see that line. It had a little bit more meaning in context now of 4 seasons, where we only had 2 seasons at this point. One other thing I'll say about the Amber that we saw in this episode, if you guys haven't listened to the interviews that we did at Comic-Con in the press room, Joel talked about the Amber. And I remember us singing his praises back in season 1, the bus incident there, where we saw the Amber, and we were going, oh man, they knew back in season 1 what they were going to do with this stuff. Not so fast. It turns out that what we saw in season 1 with the Amber, it got to this point in the series, and he was like, Amber, I can do something with that. And so it was kind of they didn't know in season 1 that they were going to come back and use it at the end of season 2 and then on throughout the rest of the series. But he found a way to make it work, and so that was kind of cool, where we had maybe given them a little too much credit. Not that they don't deserve a lot of credit, obviously, but that was kind of interesting to see or to hear his take on what the Amber actually was and how he used that later on. All right, and another thing from that same interview is he talks about White Tulip. We did the White Tulip where we all held up pieces of paper that had the White Tulip, and he talks about what that meant to him, that moment, but where the White Tulip came from, the idea of the White Tulip. And it's so good. It's such good stuff. So go over and listen to that podcast. It's the Comic-Con Fringe Press Room podcast, or go over to our YouTube channel and check those out. I know I'm self-plugging, but it's you'll love it. You'll be glad you did. So go check those things out. I think that's all the notes I had on this particular episode. Any other thoughts from any of you guys on I guess really on season 2? Anything you want to talk about, or just kind of reiterate, or on these episodes or this finale?
Well, I guess I just want to echo what Lou mentioned in that Fringe was really at the height of its creativity, the height of its achievement. I feel like during this time, every week was just outstanding, and you just couldn't wait to get back into it. And I really found that to be true. I've actually consumed season 2 over the last 2 weeks, and rewatching it has been just as satisfying, and that's just a testament to where they were at the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's been very satisfying.
Yeah, I agree. Like, for me, the first season of Fringe, I enjoy it a lot more now that we have 4 seasons. I can go back with new eyes and revisit those episodes and say, oh yeah, there's little bits and pieces in here that kind of play into the later seasons. But at the beginning, it was a tough slog, and it wasn't till they moved from serialized, from the standalones to the serialized episodes, that Fringe kicked off for me big time. And that's what happened from the Jacksonville episodes forward. So yeah. This is just another great, we had the great closing shot at the end of season 1, and we get another great one, as John mentioned, at the end of season 2 with Olivia inside the cell slamming against the window. So just great to see a show finally find its footing, put its mark on the map and follow that course, and just really start hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's move on. We've got one more episode to cover, and I mentioned this in the beginning. This episode is called Unearthed, and this was filmed originally in season 1, but not aired until the middle of season 2, and it caught people off guard. Those who hadn't, say, been listening to the podcast where we had warned people, hey, this episode is exactly what I just described. I remember people being confused. We got some emails, or even on Twitter I saw some things where people were like, where did Charlie come from? I thought he was dead, and it was just really confusing for people, and understandably so. I'm glad they pulled it out. Any Fringe is better than no Fringe, but it was certainly an odd placement for it. But this episode is called Unearthed, and the synopsis is: a brain-dead teenager is removed from life support so donor organs can be harvested. Doctors operate quickly, but the girl revives and recites a classified alphanumeric code from a nuclear submarine. As odd as her resurrection is, and that she is speaking Russian, her condition is not what it seems as she begins to satisfy her own agenda. This was written by Jeff Pinkner, Joel Wyman, Akiva Goldsman, and Seth Mann. And I should also point out that all these synopses and all this information is coming from our friends over at fringepedia.net. And I should also point out that the glyphs in the finale over there, part 2, spelled Weiss, as in Samwise. All right, so I'm going to kick off the discussion for Unearthed, and I think it's John's turn to go first.
Okay. Well, I'll just say I was one of the confused ones. I had not yet found the podcast or a good online community for Fringe, and it was so weird because they had dropped off in the middle of season 2, and then all of a sudden, this episode came in with Charlie, and I was like, what is going on? Yeah. But then I heard an explanation later, so just count me as one of those in that boat.
Sure.
Loved the line when they're watching Walter's Scariest Home Movies that Walter says that subjects 1 through 5, since they're watching subject 6, he thinks the university settled with them out of courts. Love that line. I took issue with this episode. Especially for who was writing it, for them to take sort of such a black and white line between religion and faith versus these Fringe science events, and that folks would have to come down on one side or the other. I really found that kind of distasteful, and I didn't feel like it was up to the level of writing that Fringe is so known for. Even in season 1, Fringe operates best when it's in the gray, and they really took a one side versus the other in this episode, and I just obviously didn't care for it. although they did try to resolve it with Walter at the end, saying,
right.
even for a scientist, I have to have faith too. And when we see his character, particularly throughout, well, I mean, White Tulip is just a huge example of this in season 2. When we see him, pleading with God, for Peter's life in season 3. Obviously he has a deep felt faith, and so I just found this to be, I don't know, just the writing not up to par. What was the other thing I wanted to say? Interesting that Rusk, the gentleman who inhabited Lisa, he went on to somebody else. That was the final scene of the episode. And they don't usually leave a standalone episode. They don't leave a case like that open-ended, and so I found that to be an interesting twist that this guy would just sort of move on from person to person,
right.
And obviously they would never come back to this. So found that to be an interesting turn of events. So I think that's about all I had for this.
Okay, Lou.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what John said. And as I just mentioned a little while ago, I'm much more into the serialized episode. So this standalone episode, right off the bat, I have a bit of trouble with it. And while I appreciated the religion versus science aspect of it, I again agree with John. I thought it was a little too black and white. And I actually like it that they bring up this kind of discussion, but I just wish they had done a better job of exploring it. I think for me, probably one of the best examples of this would be the movie Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. They, one's a scientist and one's a religious figure, and I like how that movie handles that kind of discussion. Here, it's nowhere near as good. I do have to say, though, that the Fringe has a lot of great cold openings, and I thought the opening scene with the girl coming back to life off the table was pretty, had like echoes of The Exorcist a little bit there.
Yeah.
That was like, whoa, that was pretty intense. So I thought that was really well done. And I guess really the stories that work best for me always have to tie into the characters in some way, and I appreciated the fact that there was a little bit of a parallel between Olivia and Lisa in terms of their family. Olivia talking about her stepfather a little bit with Peter, so that was kind of nice. It did bring a little bit more to the episode than normal, and it was if you like that kind of thing, it was kind of funny to see that girl Lisa smitten with Peter a little bit, and kind of egging on Olivia a bit, say, I'm turning 18 soon, so you better make your move if you're interested in this guy. So that was kind of a nice little bit too. But yeah, overall, it's it's not an episode I would come back to for a rewatch on very, very often.
Yeah, I think we're largely on the same page here. I thought that comment about her turning 18 when coming after Peter was, I mean, it stood in stark contrast to what we just talked about, where Olivia has developed feelings for Peter, and she's like, you have to come back because you belong with me. And then we have this episode where that relationship had not yet developed, and they stood in stark contrast to one another. And I felt the same way that you guys did about the religion versus science. I have no issues with those conversations or those being brought up in shows. Even though I'm a man of faith, I don't have any issues with them being brought up. But I felt like this one came down too heavy on one side. And I think what it was that, and it may have been a John Noble thing, but Walter was just so much more forceful that it came down so heavy on one side. And thinking about what we saw back in the episode Peter, when Carla Warren, when Walter said there's only room for one God in this lab and it's not yours. But Carla stood up strong to that strong personality and said, look, I may go to church every Sunday and I may do this and this and this, but blah, blah, blah. And I don't remember the whole quote, but you guys know what I'm talking about. And that was good because there was balance there, and so there was a dialogue, and both personalities were strong to carry both sides. That was not the case here, and even though Walter did come around at the end of the episode, it still wasn't enough to really offset what they had done throughout the episode where he's attacking the church. And I'm not Catholic or anything like that, but it was still a little bit too much. And so I think I'm in agreement with you guys. It's not really an episode that I'll ever go back to, I don't think, but it was certainly interesting in where it was slotted. It was awkward kind of all the way around, I think. I found the girl's manly voice when she was portraying Rusk to be highly irritating. I would have rather her spoken in her normal voice than this fake manly voice. But one thing I will say that I liked was the mom said at one point, "I can't lose her again," which is a line that we've heard Walter say regarding Peter. And Walter said, "I understand," but it wasn't like it, the audience had not yet gotten to a point when this episode was filmed that the whole Peter story had evolved to where we fully understood his past. And so they didn't really play up that line like they would have had, say, it actually been a season 2 episode. He says, "Yeah, I understand," but he didn't really empathize with her. It didn't really carry the weight that he did truly, in fact, understand what it's like to lose a child and then have that threat of losing that child again. So I kind of wish they would have played that up a little bit more, but given that this was filmed in season 1, I can see why they didn't. But those are my thoughts on the episode. Heather, what about you?
Okay, so we know Peter knows Farsi and Cantonese, and apparently he knows some Russian too. So, yeah, that was interesting. And I was finding, so we know this was a season 1 episode, and they didn't air it. And part of me watching this episode was picking out things that showed up in later episodes. So part of me is wondering, they filmed it and decided not to air it, and so they said, "Oh, well, we can take some of these ideas and put them in other episodes." Yeah. Like the girl waking up and talking in numbers or talking in Russian reminds me a lot of Olivia waking up and talking and saying the Greek phrase from Peter's mother. And so it's different, but still the same image of waking up and saying something you don't know about, what you shouldn't have known about, but an Olivia learned somewhere, which may have been a similar way that this girl, well, not exactly similar, but like Walter says, that coma patients, their spirits can move and see events they couldn't see. So there's one explanation of how Olivia found out the Greek phrase she found out earlier, the first of season 2, which was after this episode was filmed. But also one thing I thought of when Walter says how the coma patients, their spirits travel and see other things, it's like people traveling to other universe, like Olivia traveling physically to other universe, or her just getting glimpses of the other universe. And so that made me think of that. And then Lisa gets another person's memories implanted in her, like Olivia gets Ultra Olivia's memories planted in her, and later she gets Belly's memories inside of her. So there's the same idea that when they filmed it, I don't know if they were thinking to hint at things, or like later they just said, "Oh, that's a cool idea, we're going to use it from this episode," that, we were just using this episode to flesh out ideas or whatever. So, yeah. There was I caught that line you mentioned earlier about Mrs. Donovan says she can't lose her Joel again. She also says later, near the beginning of the episode, when she's telling Olivia that she never thought she'd have a chance to say "I love you" again to her child, which also made me think of Walter, who, when his child died, he did get a chance, like she got a chance. She has her daughter again. He got his son again, and so, yeah. That was my idea.
Okay. One other thing I'll add here, Linda is lost in the chat room is pointing out how wrong they got the organ transplant. She says that they, in reality, they leave people on life support during that process, which would make sense. You'd want body functionality continuing to keep the organs alive. So I'm not a medical person, so I wouldn't have caught that. Thank you, Linda, for pointing that out. All right, any other thoughts, guys? Nope. All right, the glyphs in this episode spelled avenge, which goes along with the Rusk character trying to avenge his death by living through other people and killing his wife. I'm going to assume ultimately he did kill his wife. I don't know if that allowed him to then pass on to the afterlife or, what happened, but I guess we'll never find out. So, all right, well, our schedule for next week, we are starting Season 3 of Fringe, and we are going to be watching Olivia, The Box, The Plateau, and Do Shapeshifters Dream of Electric Sheep. Such good episodes again, and very much looking forward to that. Oh, and also Amber 31422. We have 5 episodes on the agenda for next week, and so very much looking forward to that. So I'm going to start wrapping things up here. You guys can think of your creative sign-offs. And while you guys do that, I'll give our contact information. I've mentioned our YouTube channel several times. I'll give it one more time. That's youtube.com/thefringepodcast. And I also mentioned that photo set over on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/goldenspiralmedia. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/fringeobservers. And, of course, our websites are Golden Spiral Media and The Fringe Podcast. You can give us a call on the Fringe phone at 304-837-2278. And you can send us an email over at feedback@thefringepodcast.com. If you want to make a donation and help us keep doing what we're doing, like the trip that we just made to Comic-Con, that was made possible through the donations that we have received from you guys, also through our sponsorship through Global Cash Card that we had for a large portion of Season 2. And we are certainly appreciative of all of those who are making donations to keep help us keep doing what we're doing here at Golden Spiral Media. We do very much appreciate it. All right, so I think that's it. You guys got your sign-offs ready. We're going to go me, then Heather, then John, and then Lou. So until next time, stay Fringe-tastic.
And I'm out in a flash of blue light.
Either universe, Fringe is finger-licking good.
May the reality that you find yourself in be the one that you want to be in.
The Fringe Podcast and Golden Spiral Media are not associated with Bad Robot Productions, Warner Brothers, or Fox. Golden Spiral Media's use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, and for educational purposes as provided within United States Code Title 17, aka Fair Use. Copyright 2012, Golden Spiral Media.